Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, July 8th, 2013 Kildover Hills Board of Commissioners meeting. Thank you for being here, and if you'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if you would please join me for a moment of silence before we start our meeting. Thank you. I'd like to recognize we have former Mayor Sherry Rollison here. Rollison, thank you for being here. Welcome. And with that, we'll move straight into our agenda, with the first item being agenda approval. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay. First thing we have actually is we'll move right into public comment. We do not have any presentations or introductions. So public comment, this is the time set aside for the public to comment on any issue that they wish to address the board with. We do ask if you're speaking as an individual that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, and if you're speaking on behalf of a group, to keep those comments to 5 minutes. We do have a sign-up sheet. We have 3 individuals who signed up on the sign-up sheet, so we'll start with those individuals. But if anyone didn't sign up, no worries, then we'll call from the floor. We do ask when you approach the podium for public comment, you identify yourself by name and address, please. And so we'll start. Mr. Harold Cook signed up first. Welcome.
Well, since you already told them who I am, I don't need to tell them.
You can just tell them that I'm right with that, right?
Right.
If you'll give your address, please.
317 Cameron Street. The last time I tried to do what I'm getting ready to do, I don't think I did a very good job. Public speaking is not my forte. But I'm not familiar with all the ramifications of the board here and what all y'all's duties are. But I wanted to bring something that's going to be discussed tonight. And everybody has an opinion, whether they drive a Ford or Chevy or whatever. But when I came to Kildover Hill, I thought it was a beautiful community. It's a lovely place to live and raise your family. And I just want to bring up some thoughts that I have that everybody may not share, but we're talking about the board members, and each one of us need to look at our community, how we have a nice police department, a nice fire department, and community service, for parks and recreation for our family to enjoy, and the visitors that come into our lovely community. With the sizes of our lots, 50, 60 feet wide, and some of them are different depths, I question the beauty that chickens will enhance to our community, how they will enhance and make it look like, this looks like a nice place I'd like to settle down and raise my family. I personally think we're kind of small on space, and with our police department and all of our services that we have, which I find very good. A couple of times we need the dog warden, or I don't know the proper name right now. But if you enhance and add on chickens, everybody's not going to do exactly what they say they're going to do at the beginning, and things fall by the wayside. And I would think that they have more important things to do to find out if somebody's chickens got loose or something of that nature. And I question, how is chickens going to make Kildover Hill a more beautiful and desirable place to raise your family and for people to come and visit? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Sherry Rollison.
Sherry Rollison, 533 Myrtle Court, Kildover Hills.
The comments that Mr. Cook made, real pointed and what have you, but I've got another opinion, and you're right. There are any issue you have, it makes no difference if chickens or what. You've got different opinions. I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm here to support the ordinance that is being considered tonight to allow the residents of Kill Devil Hills the opportunity to raise chickens in their backyards per the restrictions of the ordinance. This issue is one that has many different opinions of pros and cons. There are a lot of misconceptions on the subject. Years ago, raising chickens was something only people in the country did. Chickens were associated with farms and wide open spaces. Not anymore. Thousands of families are adding a small flock of 2 to 6 hens in their backyards, many next door to their doghouse. The biggest misconception with raising chickens is that you need to live in the country. This is simply not true. Local regulations or neighborhood ordinances may impact the decisions, but many communities are very chicken friendly or convinced otherwise. Fresh eggs are the most obvious reason. They are more flavorful than anything you will find in the store. Chickens are amazing compost factories. They will turn almost any kitchen scrap into a nutrient-rich garden additive. Chickens make great pets. They have great personalities. They are absolutely the most low-maintenance pet, except maybe a goldfish, that you can own. As long as they have fresh water, fresh food, and a clean coop, they will be happy as can be. They aren't needy like many animals and are just as happy when you're not at home. Chickens represent a long-term survival strategy. If a time ever comes when food is not readily available, you have access not only to the eggs, but to chickens. The ordinance is well written and addresses many concerns that one might have regarding smell, disposal, number of hens, even regulating the size of the coops and the locations. I could go on and on and on about the benefits of the chickens, and yes, there are some negatives that I have said on there, but I hope that the Board of Commissioners will pass this ordinance.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Next, the third individual that signed up is Kathleen Wesniewski.
My name is Kathleen Wozniewski. I'm at 313 Cameron Street, and I just wanted to come out in support of the proposed amendment change to allow backyard hens for the town residents of Kill Devil Hills, and to thank you all for considering it. And I hope you will choose to pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly. Okay, we'll call from the floor, and we've already had our first resident step forward. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Bob Gabriel. I live at 526 West Ocean Acres Drive. And this year I've had the real pleasure of having my first real garden after working the compost for 2 years. And I've been eating my own tomatoes now for the last 3 weeks. And there's nothing I like more than eating fresh food. Chickens are great. I love my eggs. I have one every morning. But there's nothing like a homegrown egg from your own coop that's not been formaldehyde, has been not chemicalized or ruined in some way. I don't like buying an egg from the grocery store. They taste terrible. And my goodness, we have enough other things running around the neighborhoods that are a nuisance. I can't imagine 4 hens or 5 hens being a nuisance to anybody. They're relatively quiet. And they make great compost too, by the way. So I like that for my garden. So yes, I'm very much in favor of this ordinance, the way it's been discussed and the way you all have written it up. And I hope you do pass this ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else this evening? Yes, sir.
Ronnie Patera, 904 South Memorial. I'd like to address the board and see if they can come up with an ordinance about abandoned and uninhabitable dwellings. I know we have one on abandoned cars on property, but I'm talking about the dwelling itself. I've talked to the fire marshal. He said it's because it's a 2 to 4 family dwelling, he can't do anything. He said if it was a commercial building, he would have had it torn down by now. It is a fire trap. It is a disaster waiting to happen. And my property is behind it on Memorial. This is at 909 Wrightsville, right behind the Presbyterian Church. In fact, it used to be the Presbyterian Church. The zoning ordinance enforcement, he went by the same day I came by his office and said, yes, the weeds are waist high, and he sent a letter to the owner, whom I understand is in a nursing home. But that property's been abandoned for 10 years. I mean, why it's still there, I have no idea. And if you're worried about the chickens, you better be worried about the feral cats that are over there, because they're gonna eat the chickens. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes.
I'm Travis Appleman. I'm at 509 Copley Drive. Wanted to come out tonight, one, to let everyone know that I was going to be running for one of the open board seats in November. The other item is about the chickens. This has been an interesting piece of a discussion for quite a while. And I think the way the current ordinance is written is something that we should be in support of. One of the things that had been discussed at a prior meeting was to potentially have a trial period where a limited number of permits were issued, and just to really kind of see how the experiment would work. I'm not sure if that's, I didn't see that in the current ordinance, or if that's still being considered, but that would definitely be a way to potentially appease some folks that might have some concerns about it. The other thing that I know I've gotten questions on is just, do we know what the total number of allowable lot spaces are? I mean, I know it's been opened up to potentially allow schools to have some chickens and things like that in this current draft, but do we know how many residences would even be able to have it? Because I think if that number is known and put out there, that might help folks that have some concerns as well. So I hope this goes through tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else this evening that would like to speak at this public comment session? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll close public comment and move on to response to public comment. What I would like to suggest for those of you who, all but one, were speaking about the chicken ordinance, which is an agenda item, that we will wait and have that full discussion at that agenda item. So if you'll bear with us on that, just for the sake of time and the fullness of the discussion. However, the one gentleman from Memorial Drive that spoke about the abandoned dwelling, not sure if anyone has anything to add at this point. Obviously, it's something that we can look into and discuss. Meredith, are you familiar with the property he's?
We're familiar with the property, and the code enforcement officer makes regular visits to the property to ensure that it is empty, but it is secured so that you can't enter the premises, and he does check the weed growth and if there's any debris or if it looks like someone's broken in or if it's become unsecured. He informs the owner that he's got a violations to our nuisance ordinance, and so he keeps a regular watch and is aware of the structure.
And is it currently the nuisance ordinance that we have in place? The parameters of that ordinance don't allow for further action. Is that correct? I mean, that would be a separate type of ordinance, which may be exactly what you're asking us to consider, a separate type of ordinance. Is that?
That's our nuisance ordinance does not prevent houses from being abandoned. The building code requires that those houses be secured so that people can't enter them and squat or start fires or become a public nuisance. And the house is secured. It is not something that you can enter from the ground level, and we check that regularly, and then the nuisance ordinance does not prohibit, no ma'am.
Okay. I do know we have a community appearance commission that was started, I don't know, probably 5 months ago now, and that has been kind of discussed a little bit at the meeting and not about, Meredith, I've forgotten the term that the committee has.
Minimum housing code.
Minimum housing code, that the committee has discussed whether or not to start exploring or not. I think certainly they would if this board gave direction to do that, or if that's something this board wants to discuss in the future. Anyone have any comments?
Yeah, I guess I want to ask a question. I don't know how to tactfully ask this question. I mean, how bad how bad is this house in disrepair? Is it, I mean, is it sellable, or is it, I mean, are the windows broken out, or?
I think the level of disrepair is probably the eye of the beholder a little bit. I mean, if you live next door to it, it probably looks a lot worse than if you drive by it once every month. I don't know that the windows are broken out. I know that they're probably not in good shape. I know that they're boarded over. I know that the doors are boarded shut. I know that 2 of the decks have been ripped off and not replaced, meaning that there's a door on the second, 10, 12 feet up that goes to nowhere. But it's not a nuisance.
I
It's not-
understand.
It's secure.
You've told me what I need to know. Okay, it makes a difference. If you're living beside it, it's very different than if you're just
That's right.
driving past
I
it.
wouldn't be able to tell you.
You've told me what I need to know. Thank you.
And it's been going on for a long time.
would
And I'm
say-
sure it's very frustrating to someone that does live by it, near it.
Yes.
Are there other municipalities that have stricter codes?
If a town were to consider a minimum housing code, that is a much higher level of enforcement with a lot of details to be worked out with the, it's a much higher level of enforcement, and you can deal with abandoned structures.
Mayor, if I may offer, if the board would like, the staff could put on our, the agenda for August that as a topic, and we could do some research for the board.
I think that would be a good idea. And I think in researching it, it would also be useful to go back as to why we don't have a minimum housing ordinance, because it grows out of our history, and perhaps it was appropriate at that time. I'm not sure that it is today. But there is a long history of the town's desire to keep it that way, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
Of
Says-
not having one?
As not having,
Okay.
and that was simply because at one time, almost 2/3 of our homes were essentially vacant, 9 months a year,
Right.
so.
And it's different if it's vacant because it's winterized and people are coming back in the summertime, but
right.
it's also very different if it's in, in a situation where they are actually becoming to a state of disrepair. And as I used to have a friend that called houses that were being reclaimed by nature. So,
Okay, well, let's do that, Debbie, if
Yes,
you
ma'am.
would not mind. We'll have this on the August agenda
Yes,
for
ma'am.
I
discussion.
think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And thank you for bringing that to us, and for being here. Okay, so we'll move on, if anyone, no further discussion, we'll move on to new business, item number 1, which is at 504 Westlake Drive in the Light Industrial 1 Zone, Fred E. Bear III and the Lake Drive Condo Association, various site modifications to rectify existing deficiencies and violations and to comply with warehouse industrial complex regulations. Meredith, would you are you prepared to do an introduction, or would this be, is that okay? Yeah, you.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. The site plan is for Lake Drive Industrial Park located at 504 West Lake Drive. The site plan includes site amendments, including parking and stormwater management. It also has interior floor plans for the entire complex and a willingness to serve from Kill Hills wastewater treatment plant. There's been some confusion with that I'd like to clear up real quick. What the plan is proposing, and the attorney who's representing the town on this has approved, the site crosses into the Southern Sanitary District, and they're going to do a recombination plat to make that all one lot. And they're actually gonna connect to the Ocean Acres wastewater treatment facility, and they're gonna need town approval, not Kittle Hills WWTP. It could connect that way if it went up Lake Drive to the bypass, but because of the recombination and because it's gonna become one lot, It's in the southern portion of it is in the Southern Sanitary District, therefore it's gonna hook onto the Ocean Acres. They've been working with Steve on what information they need to provide, engineered plans for the lift station and the connections, and they're also working on the recombination plat to move forward with that, and it's on the site plan that a recombination plat will be required. So just to clear that up a little bit, it was a little bit confusing to start with. And this will rectify many of the site violations at Lake Drive Industrial Park, and once this is done, they can move forward with dealing with some of the building code issues that they have at the site. They need to get the zoning in compliance prior to moving forward with the building code. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have specifically about the site plan. Brian Sewell with House Engineer is here to answer any engineering questions, and Fred Bear is also here, who's the owner, majority owner of the site, I believe.
And this did go before the planning board, and the planning board supported
Recommended
this.
approval with the condition. The only condition remaining is the wastewater.
Okay, yes.
I have two questions. The first is relative to the wastewater fund. This proposed recombination and joining through the Ocean Acres is to the wastewater fund's advantage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Excuse
me. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I agree.
The
Okay.
town will receive all the fees and
Okay. The other thing is that in the past, we have had trouble with these properties adjoining the properties in Ocean Acres, the lots that back or front to Ocean Acres and back to the industrial park. We've had difficulties with water runoff coming off of the light industrial properties onto the residential properties. Will this correct those deficiencies?
this plan improves the stormwater management system so that it does meet our ordinance and will prevent runoff. It also is gonna create a vegetative buffer, which will also assist in that runoff.
Boy, you can get a vegetative buffer in there, it's so tight. I mean, it's,
Brian, do you
we're
wanna-
talking 4 and 5 feet setbacks there.
Yeah, they've proposed a buffer. If the landscaping plan you have shows the trees and bushes
Okay,
that are proposed, I
okay.
think there's well over 100 that are proposed along that back property line.
Okay,
In addition to the DWQ permit, which will allow them to fix all
Yeah.
their stormwater ponds, and they have a gutter system that'll send it to the.
yeah,
stormwater pond.
I'm familiar with the design system, and I know that in the past it hasn't worked very well. And typically what has happened is the downspouts have been cut at the collection point and allowed to drain on the property, but immediately it runs over into the residential properties, which happen to be lower. And there's been some damage to some of those homes. But if this is going to, what we need to do is strengthen the requirements on the collection systems for those roof,
And it'll be.
those roofing collection systems on those warehouses, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Brian, did you want to address anything since you're here this evening about the plan? Put you on the spot.
House Engineering. First of all, this has been a process, and I want to really thank staff up front for helping us get through this process. Without them, we couldn't have done that. I said this to the planning board and all meetings. So thanks, Brian, thanks, Meredith, thanks, Greg, thank the whole department. They helped a lot. One of your concerns about the septic, we just found out that we had approval today. So we are working with Steve, figuring out water gallons per day, and those agreements will be worked out. We've been working with the town engineer to find out exactly what the specifications and the permits that are needed. We'll go through that whole process. Now, as far as the buffers and the stormwater, they're going to be improved. There is an existing state stormwater permit in
Right,
place
right.
that we have brought into place, brought it up to current town of Kill Devil Hill standards. And there's going to be some modification out there to make it a little deeper, a little wider, make the inlets, and plus improve the gutter system. So.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Okay. Is anyone prepared to make a motion?
I move approval as submitted.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, second item under new business is the proposed amendment to Chapter 94, Animals, to permit and establish regulations for chicken hens within the town.
Okay,
Switch my packet for a second.
Could we ask planning to talk about the amendments that are necessary to the ordinance as presented?
Basically, if you'll first, Meredith, explain some of the things that you were discussing that need to be made to the language as it currently is presented.
To explain it so everybody
Yeah.
will understand, is to give a little background. This amendment came before, you can't hear me? Hello?
Oh, is it on?
It's on. Oh. Got it? Okay.
He got it.
This amendment, a similar amendment was proposed in 2012. And at that point, the amendment did not make it through the Board of Commissioners, and this amendment is very similar to the previous amendment with some modifications. One of the modifications being that it adds one of the zones that the chicken hens would be permitted into the government and institutional, private, and public ownership. With that being said, there's a few hiccups in the ordinance that need to be corrected to make sure that that is allowed. One of those, let me get it up on the screen, it might be easier for you guys to understand. The first one is under A, and it limits the use as an accessory to a residential use. If this is to be allowed in the GNI public ownership at the schools, for instance, we would need to modify that as an accessory to a residential or school use. The second amendment would be to B. It limits the chicken hens to reside on the property of which the owner lives. Well, no one lives at the schools or government buildings. So the proposed change would be to, at the end of that sentence, with authorization in order to keep chicken hens with the exception of the Dare County schools. That would allow the school systems to have chicken hens if they so chose, and they would not be under the residential requirement. And Commissioner Pitt also found a different amendment. Do you want to explain that one?
Yeah, what we did was we crossed out domestic fowl of all descriptions and then added in chicken roosters as an exception. But what we've effectively, if we were to pass this, it would permit ducks, geese, ostriches, what's the other thing, ewes or whatever they farm them. In other words, we could have unlimited number of ostriches on a farm here, so this needs to be fixed.
And the recommendation would be to put the domestic fowl back into the ordinance,
Right.
remove the strike through, and instead of including chicken roosters, it would say except
With the
chicken
exception of
hens.
chicken, yeah, with the
So it would
exception of
accept out
chicken
chicken hens, but
so-
still prohibit domestic fowl
Right,
except for chicken hens.
That's great. It's very explicit
right.
then.
Because otherwise I'm gonna, I've always wanted a duck farm and I haven't.
And one other change that has been made is that they did put a minimum number of hens based on
Right.
Commissioner Pitt's recommendation at the public forum of 3, who said they were social animals, so they put a minimum number. That was added since the last ordinance. And other than that, it's nearly identical. The Rollisons are here. They made application for this text amendment, and I'm sure that they can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Before we get into discussion, I would like to give the applicants an opportunity if they wanted to say anything. Rob, did you want to address?
If y'all have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Other than that, we've been over all the facts and anecdotes and all that stuff last year.
Okay. If we do get into questions back and forth, if you don't mind going over to the podium there, that would be great. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Pitt.
Some communities in adopting ordinances similar to this, and I think this ordinance is well prepared. It tracks pretty much with the ordinances that I've seen in other communities, but many communities limit the number of permits in the first 2 or 3 years of the program. I think technically the idea is that if we keep it a small number, we can see what the problems are. And if it's getting out of hand, we can reconsider it. In other words, you set a time 2 or 3 years out, and you limit the number of permits to 15 or 20 or 25 or whatever you think is appropriate for your community. Is there any interest in the board in doing something of that sort and limiting the scope of the ordinance for a period of time before we let it just go? I don't particularly care because I know of no community where after 2 years they decided that, I mean, it's just something else to keep track of, and some other commission's gonna have to put it on their tickler to keep track of in some hot August meeting, but on the other hand, it does give the board the opportunity to revisit. And if it suddenly becomes wildly popular, you can limit it to 15 or 20 permits until, 75 chicken hens, so to speak, until such time as you're satisfied that we know what we're doing. And there are problems. For example, how is animal control going to deal with the complaints of feral cats and foxes breaking into the chicken pens, which of course they're going to do. And I'm sure that you will expect us to come and get the red fox, and I'm not sure how we're gonna do that. But at any rate, those kinds of issues. I don't particularly see any reason for doing that, but other communities do that.
Reed, did you have a comment?
I don't have a problem with doing that. And I think we talked about this before. And I think there's been a whole lot of talk about this. I think even if we set the number at 15 or 20, I don't think we're going to hit that number, to be quite honest
Probably.
with you.
No, I agree.
But that's, I think, like you said, it might actually just be something more that we can do with, it'd be something more for staff to do. However, if it makes the citizens that are opposed to this feel better, and it gives them more of a sense of security that we're, doing our job, then I don't have a problem with that. If that's what they want us to do. But because they've got to have a permit. We're gonna know where they are anyway, so it's not gonna be.
Yeah, may I ask you?
Yeah.
Are chicken hen permits required in Kitty Hawk?
I'm not sure. I would.
No,
Oh,
they're not.
really?
Yeah,
Or in,
Mania.
yeah.
Well, and to be honest with you, and I
No, I
probably
just wondered.
shouldn't even say this, but I mean, I've been told, as people were slamming doors in my faces earlier, when we had this conversation a year ago, I had people tell me, there's chickens in Kill Devil Hills, you just don't know it, they're right under your nose, flap! So, obviously, there's things we don't know about. So they can't be that loud or bad or obnoxious, but that's just me.
I support what you're saying to look at that, because not only to give those who may have some concerns a little bit of comfort that this is going to be monitored, but also if we put this on that we're going to set a certain number and either revisit this when we get to that number or to that timeline, if we set it 2 years, perhaps we're also looking at it from the perspective, maybe we're making this way too difficult and the whole permitting process is not necessary. I think you could look at it both ways,
There
but
you
at
go.
least set the
There you go.
parameters
All right.
where.
All right.
So I like the parameters because it gives us the flexibility
Okay.
of keeping
Is there
it.
anybody clever enough to come up with the language, so we can do it now? Debbie, can you do that? Meredith, can you?
I think it can be very simple, that if you choose to approve this with the amendments that Meredith spoke to and the one that you spoke to, with the addition of, and if you want to put a number on it,
How about 15 permits, 2 years?
and that would be August 2016.
Okay.
And there's your
Do you-
motion.
Any objection from anybody in the audience?
Just our only concern would be that in 2 years, we have live animals. What are we gonna do with them? So we would ask for maybe a little bit longer time. Maybe could we go 3 years?
I think the point isn't that you wouldn't be allowed to keep your chickens.
It's just a
No new per-
it's a
no new-
reevaluation.
No new permits.
That they would not, if there is a concern with the board, then they would stop issuing them. But my understanding is that then you wouldn't be required to give up your chickens.
Okay, we just wanna make sure every 2 years we don't have to do this.
Oh,
Yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
No.
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 And I'm wondering if the schools, I don't know how much school interest the schools have.
I think it was just so they could hatch chickens in incubators, because right now they can't do that, because Mania High School can do that. They were concerned that they would be in violation. It's not really to keep them at the school, so they could do it as a science project.
All right.
Okay.
Now, let me ask this question then in regard to the schools. Have we talked to anybody at the school about this?
I have not,
Well, suppose it turns out they want every child in the class to have their own chicken.
well, that,
It's just the high school science that wanted to do it same as Mania.
I know, but there are 30 kids in a class.
They live in Nags Head,
25.
Southern Shores, and
they'd have to spread out. They'd have to take their chicken home with them.
Hopefully
they'll spread out.
That's right.
Yeah, they're gonna run out of
But do we
space.
want to change the number requirement for the schools?
If the school came in for a permit and it differed from the ordinance, I'm sure that we could take it to the manager and that she could contact the board for the purposes of education and we could.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, I'm satisfied
And
with
I would
that.
like to suggest instead of 15, I mean, is there anything, I was originally coming to this meeting, in my mind, I was thinking 25. Can we compromise and go
Sure.
20?
Whatever. I just picked a
Yeah, that
number.
works.
Okay.
It could be 50. I don't,
So we're saying 20 each year for the 2 years?
No,
or
20 total. 20 total.
I would say let's set it at 20 and if the language can be drawn to where we revisit in 2 years or whichever comes first. I mean,
Yeah,
if we
yeah.
have,
Right.
I don't think we will, but if we have 20 people that come for a permit within the next 6 months, then I think we reevaluate them because obviously it's a lot more popular than we thought it would be and I'd like to
And we
know
could,
that
and the
interest.
staff could report to the board at the time
Yeah.
that there have been these major problems or there haven't been any problems.
All right.
Exactly. Yeah, we're flexible. It's not.
Okay, all right, so to get our arms around what this motion is gonna look like, it's
Okay.
gonna need to be a motion that accounts for the language, the changes that Meredith mentioned, the
Right.
change that you mentioned.
Right.
And then the addition of a paragraph that's going to say, the board is going to revisit this ordinance after 20 permits are issued, or 2 years, whichever comes first.
Right, and the 2 years would be August 2016. I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm not, why I'm thinking it's August.
15, July.
Oh, my,
July.
I said August.
Okay,
My fault.
2015. Okay, so can that be the motion? Is that, Mary, is that enough to be the motion? Okay,
All right.
so I have made that
I-
motion.
Oh, okay, I seconded it.
All right.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will say, before we move on, this is just my little soapbox for a moment. I think the opportunity when people come together and they express, which is, a great thing on the heels of our, July 4th holiday, the ability to come to a public meeting and express your opinion, whether you're for something or against something, it's just a great celebration of the democracy that we live in. So I very much appreciate, and I would hope I'm speaking for all of the commissioners here,
Absolutely.
hearing both sides. And I really think it's our job to try to come together and make decisions where we're trying to take all of those considerations into under consideration, or all of those opinions and the way people express their feelings, take that into consideration and make a decision that we think is in the best interest townwide. So thank you all very much on both sides for being here and expressing and being part of the process. Thank you.
And I'll say one thing too. I'm not much into eggs. I don't like eggs a lot. And I'll tell you, for those of you who were a little bit opposed to this, find a neighbor or someone who has a fresh egg and try it, because there is a huge difference. I was absolutely 100% shocked when I tried the difference in Kitty Hawk at my mom's house. So it's just truly, it's a world of difference. So I just throwing that in there. I'm not gonna have chickens, by the way, but
In Kirkland, there's so much difference, they sell them for $3.50 a dozen.
really. See,
Okay. Well, thank you.
start a new business.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, we'll move on to
We'll have to add
new
government
business
after
item
2
number
years.
3. We have one appointment this evening to the Personnel Board. Over. Let's see.
I don't think we read
Okay.
this right.
No, there were actually, there's 3 vacancies that we have open right now. 2 are on the Historic Landmarks Committee, but we're not prepared to act on those tonight. We did not have any applications, we did not have any applicants ready to fill those, the 2 seats on the Historic Landmarks Commission. So we will advertise for that, encourage people, anyone in the audience, if you're interested in serving on that, please put an application. We are seeking to fill 2 positions on that commission.
And we've advertised for that, correct?
Yes, sir. That was in this past weekend's paper.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have 1 appointment to the Personnel Board. And the applicant for that seat, or not the applicant, it's Jackie Rick Sample, who's been serving in that capacity on the Personnel Board, who did express that she was interested in being reappointed.
I move Ms. Rick Samples' reappointment to the Personnel Board for a new term.
And I'll second that.
Any further discussion, or any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great, thank you. And the last item under new business, item number 4, is the authority to request proposals and qualifications for a financial advisor to assist the town of Kildare Hills in preparing the beach nourishment project.
Okay, I'm the guy who suggested this, so
Yes, sir.
with your permission, the idea here is to employ a firm that specializes in this to advise us in doing such things as determining exactly what proportions of the funding will come from each source, how it will be divided up, how the special service district should be defined, do a rather precise analysis to, in other words, keep us out of trouble. That's the first task, and because that will lead us directly to establishing the special service district, which is probably one of the more important things that this commission has to do before the end of the commission at the end of this year. The second thing that this firm will do is advise us and keep us straight in terms of the bonding that will be required for the revenue bonds that we will be required to procure. And we need to stay within the bounds of the statutes and within the bounds of the Municipal Government Commission. Those are the people that we have to please and gain the approval of, and we can, this company will be the company that will help us do that and make sure we stay on the track and we don't do something stupid. The fee for doing this typically runs between $20,000 and $40,000. I think Nag's Head was under 30, wasn't it?
Yes,
About
sir.
27, I think you told me, Debbie, something of that order.
Yes, sir.
And I think we could expect something similar. Ours is actually less, it might be less complicated, it's fewer lots involved. So we might be somewhat less than that, but I'm not sure of that, time has passed. But that's the order of magnitude of the cost of this service. And I strongly recommend we give the town manager the authority to do this. I think it will pay big dividends and be very helpful to us as we move forward in this effort to push the project forward.
Comments, questions?
If I may, Mayor, what I'd like to actually ask the board's permission to do is, and I spoke with Commissioner Pitt about this earlier today, our finance director has spoken with Kim Kenny, the finance director in Nag's Head. They used a group out of Charlotte called the Carter Group. They did not do requests for proposals. They used this firm based on recommendations from Dare County. And both Beverly and myself, as well as Amy, our assistant finance director, are very comfortable with using that as our recommendation for the Carter Group. And I would like to have the board's permission to request from them a proposal that I could bring back to you at the August meeting for your acceptance.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I'd like to offer a motion that we authorize the town manager to do that.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Any discussion or questions? I have one question. Is this is this all pre-work that's done? And then, I mean, does this find it is just to build the plan is basically what it
That's
is, and then
correct.
that sort
That's
of,
correct.
and that's because it's not a,
Right,
it's not a skill set, not putting anyone down.
Yes.
That's not something that we have on our staff or would
No.
entrust
No,
in doing,
no.
right, okay.
the bonding is probably the area that we have to be most careful in, and we're not familiar with it, because we're such a small municipality, but that is where you can get yourself into a jam.
Yeah, we don't wanna
You
do
can
that.
get yourself into a position where you can't back out. And so that's why it's useful.
And they would also be in a position with what Commissioner Pitt said concerning the bonding. You know, they would be in a position to recommend the bonding attorney and just moving
whole
ahead with that package, guiding us through the local government commission. And Kim from Nags Head spoke very highly of their performance for them. And Beverly is familiar, like I said, she is familiar with their organization.
Great, okay.
Thank you.
All right, so there's a first and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. We'll move on to Commissioner's agenda. Commissioner Pitt? Commissioner Rubada?
I have a couple of things. I first wanted to say, I'm just going to bring out something because sometimes when we do the consent agenda, it's kind of, you don't actually know, we do it and you don't really know what's on it. One of the things that's going to be on the consent agenda is the fact that we spoke at the last meeting about the four of us foregoing our 2% COLA this year, which is not a lot of money, but it's enough, and around $800, I think, is something along the lines of what we talked about. But this year it's a little different because there is also some lapsed salary money for the empty commissioner seat that is also there. So that's one reason why we were really looking into doing that. So that makes it a little bit more of a substantial amount of money. So with that, we're still looking into what we're doing with that. I think we've kind of almost decided on maybe an ice cream social with that. I don't know that that's actually on there, but that's kind of what we're looking at with that. But we also decided to purchase an AED with some of that money as well. So that's one of my champion causes right this moment. So I'm still thankful to Mark for all he did, and to the chief and all of those of you that go out and save lives every day. So thank you very much for that. And the other thing, I've talked with Meredith a little bit, and I think the mayor has spoken with Greg Loy about this, and I can't remember if we've talked about it here, but I'd like to see if maybe we could get staff to look at see if we've got an ordinance, or if we can come up with some kind of ordinance about summer events and the large events during peak tourist times. I don't know exactly how to word that, but Sheila, help me.
I think basically what we're looking at is some guidance from the planning staff on possible modifications to the ordinance to make sure that we're not overextending our resources during the
Thank
summer.
you. That's what I'm looking for.
But yet that we're also supporting events that need to happen during the summer.
Yeah, we don't want to eliminate anything. We don't want to say we're not doing this, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're not providing the services that we need to be providing at the same time. So,
Is that enough guidance, Meredith?
thank
Okay.
you.
There you go.
All right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think we should, I know, confine the larger events. I know we have the marathon in November, and there's other rather large events early in the year and later in the year. And what we're trying to, I think, what you're saying is what we're trying to avoid is to have something huge on the beach when all the people are here. You know, to kind of
Right.
think about what we're doing there and have it, a way to regulate it so that it's a fairly modest event and it doesn't disrupt people's vacations during the peak season.
Correct. And not just the disruption of the vacation, but I want to make sure that if something really big were to happen, that we've got the available resources to do it. I mean, if our fire department, police department, and all that are out doing that kind of stuff, that if something major were to happen, that we don't want to put ourselves in a bad situation.
Debbie, did you have any questions? Or you're okay?
No, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Anything else?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
Nothing.
Nothing tonight? Okay. Moving on to Mayor's agenda, just an update from the Community Appearance Commission that met week before last. That group's continuing to meet on a monthly basis. And while we have tabled that we're not going to do the trash attack in the fall, but they definitely want to have it stay on the agenda so it does become an event for the spring, so that will stay in place. And they actually, probably by the next meeting, I think I'll have some actions to come here and request the board to do. So it's a very active and engaged group, and I'm enjoying being a part of that group.
Anything else?
That's all I have this evening.
I actually do have something. Mary
thank you.
gave us all these cards for pedestrian and bicycle safety, pedestrian on one side and bicycle on the other. And it's very informative, and, you know, it could conceivably save a life or save somebody from getting hurt. And they've given us a few, and I'm going to give some to some friends. And anybody that wants any, Mary has a big stack of them there at the desk, and get one for yourself if you like, and maybe one that you want to pass on to a friend that's a cyclist of yours or whatever. It's good reading too. There's some stuff on there that I hadn't even thought of. So I don't walk the bypass much though, believe me. So.
Thank
But
you.
anyway, Mary has some of those if any of you like some.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Town manager's agenda.
No, ma'am, thank you.
Okay. Town attorney's agenda.
Nothing for you tonight.
Okay, consent agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. 2 items. First is the minutes from the June 26th, 2013. The second is budget amendments. The first one, the Dare County Tourism Board grant for the electrical work at the Frog Pond. The Government Access Channel grant for videoing and equipment. The third one, as Commissioner Rubottom spoke to just earlier, the elimination of the 2% COLA for the board members. And then the fourth one is to appropriate funds to purchase 1 portable AED for the police vehicles. The reason you're not seeing anything for the ice cream social is that would actually be a budget transfer, so it doesn't need to come to the board. And with that, would recommend approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Well, we've reached the second time set aside for public comment this evening. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak? Yes, sir.
One thing I'd like to clarify, excuse me. I'm not here because it's an eyesore. I'm here because it's a fire hazard. The house next to it, Mr. Black, he's been here, well, I don't know if he's been here, but he's been to the same people I went to. Mr. Pace on Clark Street has been to the same people, so, you know, I thought I'd give you all a shot. There are broken windows. The doors are open. People were in there the 4th of July because I was next door at Mr. Black's at a 4th of July party. They were prospective buyers, not so much for the house or the dwelling, but for the property. As far as the grass, it's my understanding that that Mr. Pace complains when it gets high. The town sends him a letter, or sends the owner a letter. After 15 days, they cut it and they send him a bill. So the town's been maintaining the grass, as to the best of my knowledge. So you might check with that. So, I've lived at South Memorial for 8 years and around the corner on Clark Street. So an eyesore, yeah, but you know, it's the danger with the arson down on Memorial, the 2 houses up in Corova, the house in South Nags Head. It is a tragedy waiting to happen. The fire department won't be there to save that house, but they'll be there to save Mr. Black's house, because it's so close, and it's gonna go up in seconds. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this public comment session? Okay, all right, well, thank you. Again, a response, I think we can look into it, especially if since the last time staff's been out, if windows have been knocked out or the facility left open. And then we will, as you heard earlier, we are going to receive information at our August meeting about, right now, our ordinance doesn't allow us to do with so many things, so we'll look at that. So, okay. Anyone else have anything to add? Okay. Does anyone have anything else before we take a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.